If you enjoy this video and would like to hear more of my stories, please click like and subscribe to be notified of when I release a new story. The fierce, deep history between Aston Villa and Birmingham City. In English football, the second city derby, or Birmingham derby, is the local derby between the two major clubs in the city of Birmingham. Aston Villa and Birmingham City, first contested in the year 1879. Villa play at Villa Park, while Birmingham play at St Andrews, the two grounds separated by over roughly 2 miles. It is known as the second city derby, based on Birmingham being referred to as the second city of the United Kingdom. The two clubs are generally regarded as each other's most fierce rivals. On 10th March 2019, Jack Grealish was punched from behind by a pitch invader during the derby match at St Andrews. Later in the second half, Grealish scored to give Villa a 1-0 victory. Following Villa's promotion to the Premier League, the teams have not met since. The clubs first met on the 27th of September 1879, when Birmingham City were called Small Heath Alliance. The game, on a pitch at Small Heath's Munt Street ground, described by the Villa players as only suitable for potholing, finished 1-0, recorded as 1 goal and a disputed goal to 0 to the home side. Villa won the first competitive game between the clubs in the second round of the FA Cup at Wellington Road in 1887 by 4 goals to 0. The last pre-league FA Cup campaign saw the first competitive second city derby occur on Saturday, the 5th of November, 1887. Villa beat Small Heath 4-0 in the 5th round. Tommy Green scored a brace before half-time with Albert Brown and Albert Allen adding to the score in the second half. This was their first meeting with modern rivals Birmingham City. The first league encounter in the First Division in the 1894 season saw Villa win 2-1 after Birmingham had been promoted to the First Division for a 2-year stint. Second Division Small Heath FC took part in the 1900 FA Cup, losing in the third round to First Division Aston Villa after a replay, Villa's Billy Garrity being the sole scorer over the two fixtures. That season, Small Heath finished runners-up in Second Division, so were promoted to the First Division for 1901. Villa won 2-0 at Coventry Road, Munt Street, with goals by Jack Deavy and Joe Batch. In the year 1901 Boxing Day fixture, Villa's Jasper McLuckie was the only scorer. At the end of the season, Birmingham were relegated back to the Second Division. Birmingham were promoted to the First Division in the year 1903, and second city derbies were played up to the year 1907 when they were relegated. The teams would not meet again in top-flight competition until 15 years later, when Birmingham were again promoted to the First Division in the year 1921. The derbies continued until Aston Villa were relegated in 1935. The two teams have engaged in several hotly contested matches. In the year 1925 league game at Villa Park, with the home side 3-0 ahead with 11 minutes to go, Blues scored 3 times in a dramatic final spell to draw the match. The following year, Aston Villa made headlines with the signing of Tom Pongo Waring, and his first appearance was for the reserves against Birmingham City's reserves, which famously drew a crowd of 23,000. Waring scored 3 times in the match. Villa were promoted in the year 1938. Both teams won their home games. Following Birmingham's relegation, there would be no further derbies until their promotion in the year 1948. The most significant clash was the final of the 1963 League Cup, which was staged not long after Aston Villa had beaten Birmingham City 4-0 in the league. Blues won 3-1 on aggregate over the two-legged final to claim their first major domestic honour. During the late 70s to early 80s, both Villa and Blues met regularly in the First Division and both teams had some memorable successes in the fixture. In the year 1980, Villa did the double over Blues and went on to win the First Division title. Blues scored a memorable 3-0 victory at St Andrews in the first meeting following Villa's European Cup triumph in 1982. Both teams promptly went into decline. Blues racked up a 3-0 win in a relegation battle at Villa Park in March 1986, but were relegated at the end of that season. Villa would be demoted the following campaign. The next time Villa met Blues in a league fixture at Villa Park again was in the second division and saw a 2-0 Blues victory. The reverse fixture at St Andrews was a 2-1 Villa victory, with both goals coming from Gary Thompson. The two sides would only meet again in the 80s in cup competitions. Villa won 7-0 on aggregate when they clashed twice in the 1988 League Cup. The same season, Villa also won a full members' cup clash 6-0. The history and hatred between the two runs much deeper than all this we have talked about. But for now, I would like to move on to both sets of hooligan firms and violent clashes between the two. Let's start with Aston Villa. Aston Villa Hardcore, often shortened to Villa Hardcore, or known as Villa Youth, when referring to the younger element of the group. The firm have been active since around the year 1993, following on from previous Aston Villa hooligan firms, the Steamers, Sea Crew and Villa Youth. The name Hardcore reportedly arising from a Metropolitan Police officer announcing on his radio, "Here come Villa's Hardcore," following the firm's emergence from a train station before an away match against West Ham United in November 1996. The Hardcore have clashed a number of times with the Zulu Warriors, associated with Aston Villa's fiercest rivals, Birmingham City. 15 people were arrested in October 2002 in a series of dawn raids in connection with serious disorders committed in the Rocky Lane area of Aston before the game between Aston Villa and Birmingham City in September 2002 in what was described as the Battle of Rocky Lane. In the year 2004, Stephen Fowler, a Category C hooligan and member of Villa Hardcore, was jailed for 6 months for his part in the fight in 2002. In 2005, he received a 12-month jail sentence and was banned from attending football matches for 10 years for his part in an organised brawl between the Villa Hardcore and Chelsea Headhunters at King's Cross in London on 27th March 2004, while 5 other Villa fans were also jailed. Fowler was jailed again in 2006 when he and 57 other people were found guilty of involvement in a riot at a Handsworth pub on 22nd August 2004, the same day as Villa's Premier League clash with local rivals West Brom. A younger wing of the firm emerged under the banner Hardcore Youth, with 2 members of the firm being banned in January 2010 from attending Aston Villa matches, being in the vicinity of Villa Park on match days, and, when Villa are playing away from home, using trains to travel the country and from entering the relevant town centre. The pair were branded as ringleaders by police and also were made to pay a fine of £500 each in court. Later on in the year, another known Villa youth hooligan was handed a 3-year banning order at Warwick Crown Court, whilst being held on remand after serving a 12-month prison sentence. He was handed the banning order after trouble flared outside Birmingham City's ground in the year 2009 after Villa won the game 2-1 with Gabby Agbonlahor scoring a late winner. Police statistics claim that after the 3 leaders of the youth faction of the Hardcore were all banned, reports of violence and potential organised clashes fell by 75%. In October and December 2010, Aston Villa played Birmingham City, and in both games, violence between the 2 sets of supporters and hooligan firms occurred, with many fans being arrested. In the first game, there were scenes of violence outside Villa Park, with Villa fans throwing a flare into Birmingham fans leaving the stadium. There was a small number of arrests, including a Birmingham City club chef. In the second of the games, after Birmingham had beaten Villa 2-1, Birmingham supporters invaded the pitch and confronted the visiting Villa fans. In retaliation, Villa fans ripped out seats and hurled them into the Blues fans. A flare was thrown from the Villa fan section into the Birmingham fans on the pitch. Villa fans were convicted for offences relating to an attack on a pub near St. Andrews after the match, frequented by Birmingham City supporters after being identified on CCTV. In January 2017, around 35 members of the Hardcore were issued with dispersal orders at the Angel Inn in Bilston, where around 55 had gathered before a 5:30 championship match against Wolverhampton Wanderers at Wolves. The Angel Inn was ordered to stop serving drinks, and nearby pubs told to lock their doors amid fears of violent disorder. The Midland Metro service was briefly disrupted as a tram was handed over to police for the purpose of transporting the fans out of the city. About 30 police officers, some with dogs, took part in the operation between the times of 3 and 5 p.m. In a statement, West Midlands police said, "To be really clear, these were a group of people we strongly believed were together to cause trouble." Villa lost the match 1-0, and Villa fans were criticised after destroying toilets in the away section of the stadium. On the 12th of August 2017, after Aston Villa's championship match against Cardiff City FC at the Cardiff City Stadium, around 30 Villa Hardcore members attacked the Cornwall Public House in the Grangetown area of the city, where Cardiff supporters had gathered following the final whistle. In November 2017, South Wales Police released a statement saying 14 individuals had been arrested in connection with the incident and posted images of 6 more men they wished to speak with. On the 10th December 2018, 10 Villa fans received prison sentences varying between 9 months and 3 years for their part in the pub brawl. 3 Cardiff supporters were also jailed. On 26th October 2023, 52 Aston Villa hooligans, including people known to be associated with the Villa Hardcore firm, were arrested in the Dutch city of Alkmaar for disrupting public order before Aston Villa's UEFA Europa Conference League group stage match against AZ Alkmaar at Arfas Stadion, and were detained by police for an array of reasons, including possession of a knife, insult, incitement, and fleeing from the police during a knife suspicion check. Apart from 1 member of the group who remained in custody, the rest were released with a fine. In November 2006, a planned launch of the book Villains, about the various Aston Villa hooligan firms, which included details of clashes with the Zulu Warriors, which was due to be held at Sensations Club in the Balsall Heath area of Birmingham, had to be cancelled due to threats that the Zulus would turn up and cause trouble at the event. Members of the Zulu Warriors were said to have taken exception to the launch of the book and the presence of rivals on what they considered their territory. I am now going to read out some of the book called Hardcore, written by Villa top lad Stephen Fowler, based on Villa Hardcore and previous Villa firms such as Sea Crew and Villa Youth. And then we will move on to a Birmingham Zulus book, so that we get a fair listen to both points of view from both firms. They are both good books. I recommend them and will leave a link in the description if you are interested in buying either of them. Let's read the Villa Hardcore book first and listen to what Fowler has to say in his book, and then we will look at the Birmingham Zulus book, and then we will have a look at the violent clashes and incidents between the two firms. The Sea Crew really became an active firm at the start of the championship winning season of 1980. The firm originated from a group of younger lads who had been organising themselves with varying degrees of success in the previous 2 seasons. 2 well-known and popular lads, Paul Billy Brittle and Andy Brown began organising coaches for away games. At a home match against Everton in September 1980, the firm was beginning to be referred to as the Sea Crew. There are various theories for where the name came from, the most popular being the C2 as the C stood for corner, i.e. corner crew, or that the C was an abbreviation of C, I as Sea Crew. As I recall, at the time of the Everton game, most of the crew were watching games from the top left of the Holt end, not the bottom right-hand corner. It was not until after Christmas of that season that people began to stand down there in any numbers. The most likely explanation for the name is that the week before the Everton game, a coachload of Villa had headed to Great Yarmouth after an away game at Ipswich. At some stage, they were referred to as the Sea Crew by people on board a coach that was heading straight back to Birmingham. Wherever the name originated from, it was without doubt a good time to be following Aston Villa. A league title was followed up with a European Cup triumph the following season. The Sea Crew became involved in high-profile incidents both on the domestic scene and abroad. The Sea Crew peaked at a European Cup semi-final in Brussels against Anderlecht. There was widespread rioting before, during and after the game. Villa fans inside the end, reserved for the home support, started fighting, and fans from other parts of the stadium scaled fences to join them. Fans ran onto the pitch and the match was halted for a while. Football hooliganism was labelled the English disease. Villa were threatened with being thrown out of the competition. At this point I thought we had it made. We were the best team in Europe and had also been labelled the worst fans. It couldn't get any better than that for me. Little did I know what was in store for us and the club in the next few years. All the older Villa lot from my area were involved in the Sea Crew. We started travelling as a proper firm. We were from all parts of Birmingham. I was in Brussels for the infamous riot. I drove over in my car with a couple of mates. We met up with the rest of the Sea Crew once we were over there. We couldn't get tickets for the Villa end of the ground. There must have been 6,000 to 7,000 Villa there. We went in the Anderlecht section. We were at war at the time over the Falklands. They started singing Argentina. They were also throwing bread at us. I think there was a bread strike on at the time. We waded into them. Riot police then waded into the crowd, trying to separate us. It was going off everywhere all the way through the game. Sadly, as the 1982-83 season saw the demise of a great team on the pitch, it also heralded the end of the Sea Crew. Times were different back then, and jobs were not as easy to come by compared to nowadays. Needs must, and many lads had started to become involved in money-making activities. These took priority over football, and the crew suffered for it. A new firm was about to emerge, the Villa Youth. Some of the old Sea Crew boys were still about, but this new firm mainly consisted of new kids on the block. The Sea Crew disappeared as quickly as it had started, but not without leaving its mark. Friendships that were forged in those days have endured the decades and still exist today. When I finally graduated into the hooligan ranks at Villa Park, the Sea Crew had virtually disappeared as a group. Most of them were still floating about here and there, but they were in smaller groups. Most of them were doing their own thing. There was a small group of us around my age. Villa didn't have an organised firm. We couldn't guarantee we would have a decent turnout every week. We had no trouble for the big matches or the local derbies. Week in, week out, however, was a different story. Most of Villa's hooligan support was centred on the Crown and Cushion in Perry Bar, the Baggot and the Norton pubs in Erdington, and the Windsor, a pub in the city centre. I started travelling away to matches with the Crown lads. A lad called Checkbook Nigel used to run coaches regularly. He was aided and abetted by a lad called Ginger Pat. I was still young, but the older lads used to look out for the younger lads. I met Villa legends such as Joey the Bat, Wilco and the Haynes brothers. Forget the players. To me these were the legends. I became friends with them all. Fashion still played a major part in it all. During this time, the look changed. We started calling ourselves dressers. The wedges haircut was still all the rage, now accompanied by Lacoste or Armani shirts, Fila BJ, Tacchini or Illes tracksuits. Sabre jumpers or the blue and white or green and white rugby tops with Benetton across the front were popular. Adidas shoes and trainers were sought after. Burberry jackets, anything which you had to go out of your way to get. Some of the older lads still held on to the bother boy image, but the main lads started to care about how they dressed. That was a little sample of the book called Hardcore. It's available on Amazon. I will leave a link in the video description if you want to take a look at it yourself. Right, we have looked at Villa. Now let's have a look at the Birmingham Zulus' point of view. I am now going to read out a section of the book, Zulus, the story of the Zulu warriors. The sound echoed around the Manchester streets. Zulu, Zulu, Zulu. It was November 20th, 1982, and the first time the chant had been heard on the football battlefield. A new football firm was born. Hours earlier, a gang of lads hooligans who followed Birmingham City had caught a train for their team's match against Manchester City at Main Road. They arrived in the vicinity of the ground, a grid of seemingly endless terrace streets in the infamous Moss Side district, in drizzling rain, only to encounter a rival gang of equal ferocity, the Young Governors. The 30 Blues were outnumbered, but one of them, Lanks, shouted, "Make a line!" So they spread out in a straight line and joined battle until the police appeared. As they were escorted to the turnstiles, they talked about the fight they just had and the fact that there were, unusually, a lot of black faces on both sides. One lad, Bamo, said it was like the Michael Caine film Zulu, the way City's black lads kept pouring towards them, to which they all nodded, saying, "Yeah, the Zulus." The name registered. During the match, someone started singing, for no obvious reason, but possibly because he'd been involved in the earlier conversation, a chant heard occasionally at rugby matches. It went, "Get 'em down, you Zulu warrior. Get 'em down, you Zulu chief, chief, chief." Before long, nearly everyone was joining in. One of the original Zulus, Noggin, a former soldier from the Yardley area of Birmingham, had been introduced to the drinking song in the army, and it involved some typically boisterous behaviour by bored squaddies. One member of the group would bend over while toilet roll was inserted between the cheeks of his arse, leaving it to dangle like a tail. He then had to drink a pint of lager whilst the rest of the group sang the song. The catch was that the toilet paper was lit, and the soldier had to down the pint before the toilet roll burned his butt. There was no toilet roll on this occasion, but the catchy song struck a chord, literally and figuratively, with many Blues that day. After the game, a goalless draw, they made their way back to the city centre and Piccadilly train station. The Governors were once more waiting to start things up. Again, there were more of them than Blues, but whenever they were outnumbered, these lads tended to rise to the occasion. The Governors ambushed them as they walked past a bus station. Blues stood and someone shouted, "Zulu!" Suddenly, the chant was everywhere, as Blues ran into City and forced pockets of fighting carried on all the way back to the station. It was during that journey it was decided that the firm should be from then on known as the Zulu Warriors. The name stuck and would eventually unite hundreds of like-minded lads from all over Birmingham. That was the start of the legend. The Zulus would soon make waves up and down the country, travelling to different grounds in large numbers in search of confrontations. The home lads would seek to defend their territory with equally big turnouts, upping the ante and making it even more important to perform. Other firms had already adopted monikers, West Ham's intercity firm being perhaps the most famous at the time. It was becoming important for the hooligans to have a name under which they could unite, producing one large outfit that would stick together, rather than a loose collection of smaller firms. To others, The Zulu name appeared natural because of the large contingent of black youths who helped establish their reputation. But the truth is that in the early days the number of black lads was relatively small. Colour was, in fact, irrelevant, as one lad, Fizzer, put it. We weren't black or white, we were blues. There was later a suggestion that the warrior part of the name was adopted from the popular American movie out at the time called The Warriors. But Fizzer said this was not the case. We went to see it, and we were blown away by it, because it was us. A gang from Coney Island go to a big meeting in central New York with all the other gangs, get blamed for a shooting they never did, and then have to get back to Coney Island with every other gang in New York trying to stop them. It was so similar to what we were doing every Saturday, along with a large portion of the young male population of the UK, going on other manors and having it with the local gangs. Anyway, this Coney Island gang were called the Warriors, and they were, just like us, a mixture of different races. The only major difference between them and us was that they were 12 fictional characters, and we were 200 and for real. The thought of our name coming from this source is a natural one, but inaccurate. Also wrong is the perception of the name coming from the large groups of Rastas who used to congregate around the Bullring shopping centre. It was suggested that London firms referred to these lads as Zulus, and that these same lads joined up with the hardcore Birmingham hooligans to form the Zulu Warriors. It's a nice story, but total fabrication. We didn't even know that the city centre Rastas were called Zulus until very recently, and although we all appreciate Bob Marley's contribution to music, I am afraid his contribution to football violence was rather less. The name came out of Main Road, and it stuck, because it was made to measure and fitted our persona like a A group. However, one of the Aston Villa main lads tells a totally different story on how the Birmingham City hooligans got their name Zulus, and tells an alternative Birmingham history lesson, and answers the allegation that the Aston Villa hooligans were racist and extreme right-wing back in the day. This is what he has to say. In 1979 the film Zulu Dawn came out. The content of the film obviously resonated with Birmingham's disaffiliated black youth. At some clubs in Birmingham city centre, especially clubs like the Powerhouse, where the hip-hop nights were running, the chant Zulu could be heard following the film's screening on television. At around the same time, Birmingham City's hooligan following started calling themselves the Zulu Warriors. To read their book, it appears it just came out of nowhere at Manchester City on the 20th of November 1982. It came from Birmingham's nightclubs. So Birmingham are saying they got the name Zulus during a row with Manchester City, and Aston Villa are saying that's not true, and they gained the nickname in nightclubs in Birmingham. If anyone could clarify which one is true, please leave a comment and get this cleared up once and for all. Now let's have a look at different clashes between the Zulus and Villa Hardcore and Sea Crew over the years. Starting with the Carling Cup semi-final game in 2010. A fan has described the violence that erupted after a Carling Cup match between Birmingham City and local rivals Aston Villa as like a war zone. 5 people were arrested and 27 hurt after City fans invaded the pitch following their side's 2-1 victory. Aston Villa fans responded by throwing a flare and ripping up plastic seats at City's St Andrew's ground. Villa fan Rob, from Cheltenham, told BBC 5 Live his 11-year-old son was repeatedly spat at during the violence. He said, "There was a lot of trouble before the game. The scenes were really disgraceful. My 11-year-old son was spat at. A pub outside the ground and parked cars were also vandalised following the quarter-final game." Steve Graham, from West Midlands Police, said the violence was reminiscent of the 80s heyday of football hooliganism. There are perhaps cops who have been in the job 25 or 30 years who went back to the future there. That's not the face of modern football, he said. Everyone was hoping that they would put on a showcase of football in the second city, and that it would be an example we could show around the world with pride. The trouble came hours before the vote to decide if England will host the 2018 World Cup. Birmingham City and the FA have said they are investigating the disorder. The club described the violence as disappointing and said it was checking CCTV and witness statements sent to them by supporters. Anyone found guilty of any disorder will face stringent action, a spokesman said. Manager Alex McLeish said the trouble threatened to bring English football back to the dark ages, but said he did not think it would affect England's bid to host the World Cup. Senior club officials met earlier on Thursday and said they planned to further discuss the disorder with Aston Villa, the council and the emergency services next week. West Midlands ambulance service said casualties suffered head, leg and arm injuries, and some needed hospital treatment. Graham said officers removed fans from the pitch within about 10 minutes of the game ending, but said some innocent parties would have been injured outside the ground. He described it as mindless and inexcusable. The FA said it wholly condemned the actions of those involved. The last time Birmingham City and Aston Villa were allowed to play each other in an evening game was 7 years ago. Following clashes between supporters during the 2002 season, West Midlands police insisted all future derbies be played on a Sunday lunchtime. The Carling Cup draw led to that rule being waived for this game. In those games in October and December in the year 2010, where Aston Villa played Birmingham City at Villa Park Premier League, 31st October, and St Andrews League Cup, 1st December, which was the first midweek game between the two sides since 2003, violence between the two sets of supporters and hooligan firms occurred, with many fans being arrested. In the first game, there were scenes of violence outside Villa Park, and there were a small amount of arrests, including a Birmingham City club chef. In the second of the two games, and larger-scale violence after Blues had beaten Villa 2-1, Blues supporters came onto the pitch and confronted the visiting Villa fans. This resulted in flares, ripped-out seats and other missiles being hurled by Villa fans into the Blues supporters. There were also flashpoints before and after the game, including the attack on a Blues supporters pub by Villa hooligans. The events were described as a war zone by a supporter who attended the game. Birmingham City were later fined £40,000 by the Football Association for failing to control their fans. There have been many other violent clashes between the two firms, but now we are going to delve into the most famous clash of modern times was the Battle of Rocky Lane. The Battle of Rocky Lane was a series of violent incidents that occurred in the Rocky Lane area of Aston before a match between Aston Villa and Birmingham City in September 2002. 15 people were arrested in dawn raids in connection with the disorders. Aston Villa and Birmingham City have a history of violence between their supporters and hooligan firms. The Battle of Rocky Lane was a series of violent incidents that occurred in the Rocky Lane area of Aston before a match between Aston Villa and Birmingham City in September 2002. 15 people were arrested in dawn raids in connection with the disorders. The weekend derby at Villa Park saw only a handful of minor skirmishes after a chance encounter between rival fans outside the ground, leading to 7 arrests. Police are now studying CCTV footage from outside the ground to see whether they can identify any more troublemakers and get the evidence to ban the yobs from attending games. This season, for the first time in 26 years, there are 4 Midlands clubs in the top flight. With Villa, Blues, West Brom and Wolverhampton Wanderers all vying for success in the Premiership, it brings 12 high-profile and high-risk local derbies. Trouble has marred previous fixtures between the Baggies and Wolves, and there was major violence that followed a Villa versus Baggies fixture in 2004. But perhaps the biggest test of the season will come later this month, when Blues meet Aston Villa at St Andrews in the Carling Cup quarter-finals. The crunch game, which comes with all the added spice of a cup knockout, is scheduled for a midweek evening kickoff, the first time the clubs will have faced each other in the evening since that 2002 season, which was marred with violence. The root cause of that Rocky Lane incident was perhaps a misguided move by old-time hooligans looking to return to their sickening heyday in the 80s, when the scourge of English hooliganism was recognised as a problem worldwide. A total of 318 so-called fans are now the subject of football banning orders issued by West Midlands police, stopping them attending games and restricting on their matchday movements. The force has also led the way with civil football banning orders. Traditionally, police applied for banning orders after someone was convicted of matchday trouble. But the civil orders gave police the powers to target those individuals who escaped arrest for brawling at games, but where there is evidence of their involvement in soccer violence. This has helped remove some key hooligan organisers from the scene, but some of those individuals will see their banning orders expire in the next 12 months or so. At the start of the season, West Midlands Police set up a new police unit to crack down on football hooliganism before it even happens. Officers from unit believe increased knowledge of persistent offenders and the use of spotters are helping keep the game safe for genuine fans. Speaking of the work to target the yobs, Inspector Howard Lewis Jones, who heads the unit, said, "Arranging to meet up for a fight is their idea of fun, but it certainly isn't ours. There is obviously so many more to tell between Villa and Blues, but for now we will leave it at that. If you have a story to tell or want to give your opinion on Blues versus Villa, or you have another story to tell, then put it in the comment section. Don't forget to subscribe to be notified of when my next video is out." Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. If you would like to see more, because I have many more stories to tell, then please like this video and click the subscribe logo in the bottom right of this screen. Thanks again and see you next time.